Welcome everybody. Let me plug my laptop in here so I don't run out of power. So one thing that our on-campus students did that we're all very grateful for is they've created some reverse engineering videos for us to allow us to understand some of the fundamental basic concepts that we ideally should have entered this course with. Realistically, for some people, this may be the first time they're encountering some of that information. Or maybe they've encountered it before and it's been a long time and they need to refresh themselves. Or maybe they already know it, but there's some stuff that you could dig a little bit deeper. And so if we go to, I just added this, it's RE review videos. And these are videos that our on-campus students have created for us. So we'll start out with assembly review, so some basics on, just learning and understanding assembly. So if you're in this course and you haven't had assembly, it's not the end of the world. I have asked people to reach out to me if that were the case, so that they could I refer them to different resources. So ideally, you've been taking advantage of that. Another option is, or the next one here is process memory, stack canaries, so on and so forth. A number of different tools, so I would definitely check those out. Some of them, and just because it's red doesn't mean I've looked at all of them. Some of them I've just kind of glanced through it, just very briefly. Actually, John's just the only one I've watched in full, so I need to carve out some time to watch these, but I do think it'll be beneficial, so I would encourage you to take a look at these. And now you're not required to view them, whether you're on campus or online, but if it's a topic that's new to you or something you could gain additional knowledge in, I would really encourage it, particularly some of the ones that involve tools, so WinDebug or Ghidra, x64 debug, those are going to be great ones to take a look at. IDA-Pro as well. Additionally, I have some other videos from some of my past courses that I will make available to students. I'll put a link up to those probably sometime next week. I really want you to spend time with the videos created by the students on campus. Many of these are students who I've had in courses before. So they've already learned a lot of great content, and they're very knowledgeable on some of the topics that they presented on. So the videos, I suspect to be very high quality. I know John's was, and just glancing through and looking at some of the others, it was abundantly clear that some of these were quality videos. So hopefully you take a little bit of time to check that out. I also have a new assignment that is coming out. It came out today. I haven't put a due date for it yet, but we'll do that shortly. So we'll go ahead and introduce that right now. So as you may have suspected, this does involve an SEH overwrite. This is one that is a newly created program, so it's not something that previously is out there. So you'll need to engage in the process. And this isn't one that is exceptionally challenging. We'll probably do some SEH overwrites that are more challenging later on, but this is a more basic, simple one. So what this is it's a chat server. So it's a server. There's a server and then there's a client, so as many clients can connect to it as you like, and your goal is to compromise the server to do an SEH override on the server through the client. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the details of this, look at it a little more closely later on. So I guess maybe this is stage one of introducing this. So because it is network based, you probably you'll want to run it and to interact with it, observe what's going on. part of the process will be engaging in fuzzing. For this, I really recommend manual fuzzing. I don't think we're experts at using the automated fuzzing tools, such as Peach. And AFL is confined to Linux. There is a Windows version of AFL. We haven't discussed that though. So for this, manual fuzzing is going to be your best approach. So much of what we've been doing the last few class periods is really what you want to do. We've taken a look at a number of different network-based programs that we've compromised, and we're going to do it much in the same fashion here. So a Python or Perl script, and I provide a very basic Python script just to get you started if you're not sure some of the commands or syntax to use. It'll give you a starting point, and I'd also encourage you to review some of the videos or some of what you may have done for the in-class activity. Another option, and we'll do this if we have time, and this is something I haven't really taught before in any of my other classes, is you're first getting a feel for something, you can also just use the Python interpreter so you can get live feedback. And so that may be an initial triaging step there, just to kind of get a feel for how the software works. But that's an approach that you probably wouldn't spend too much time on. That you'd very quickly graduate to creating a script with it. Somewhat similar to interacting with something with Netcat, so you can get immediate feedback and then decide what you want to do from that. It's just part of just perhaps understanding how the program works. If something is network based, a good thing to do is also to run Wireshark, get a PCAP, and you can analyze that. For this one, it's not exceptionally complicated, so you could even potentially bypass that if you interact with it enough and you kind of get a feel for what it's doing. So you potentially may run Wireshark, but it's not necessary. And some other static analysis techniques, like if you go into and examine it in IDA, you might you'll see whether or not something is necessary or not necessary. And then from there, it's just a matter of hooking up our debugger. In this class, we've talked a lot, used a lot of WinDebug. And if you're not confident in WinDebug, one of our students has a great WinDebug video up. If WinDebug is too complicated for you and you want something that's a little bit more GUI based, then we have an excellent x64 debug video. So that'll walk you through on how to use that. If you've only used OllyDebug or Immunity, maybe it's been a while, x64 debug is pretty similar to that. Just a little bit different, some additional features, a little bit more feature rich. But whatever you do, this is an SCH overwrite, so you need to have some way to monitor whether or not you're successful in overwriting SCH. And the x64 debug does discuss how you can do that, utilizing that tool. And certainly we've talked a lot about how we can do that in WinDebug with the bang ex chain command. So all of this is just really basic introductory information, just kind of regurgitating a lot of the concepts and principles that that have guided us through the course. So we really have two different tasks for us. The first one is pretty simple, is just simply to exploit it. Go through the process, use debuggers, use IDA, whatever it takes, and compromise it. So I'm just looking for a screenshot showing that you're successful, and additionally the script. Sometimes I will run the script. I'll always look at the script. If it looks very similar to many other scripts I ran, I may not run it. But there will be a point later in the course where I will run every script just to make sure that it is what it appears to be, and it's not being misrepresented or as unfortunately those types of things do occur. So make sure to include it. If you don't include your Python script, all of these things that I asked are not optional. So make sure to do that. I think graduate students are pretty good at following instructions, so don't need to worry about that too much. And the second task is, and this is kind of what we're going to be looking at more today, is what caused it. And we've spent a lot of time studying the nature of vulnerabilities the first 3 or 4 weeks, perhaps a little too long. I don't know. But we need to gain some insights into what is the root cause of this vulnerability. When we have something that is a compiled binary, it's certainly, and we don't have access to the source code, it makes it a lot more challenging to find the vulnerability. We could say, there's an SCH overwrite. Maybe we suspect there was a buffer overflow. SCH overwrite is really a technique, and buffer overflow is very general. We need something much more specific. So just saying buffer overflow is inadequate. We need to, it's a good starting point, but we need to establish where and how that buffer overflow occurs. So, and this is part of the course where we're digging in a little bit deeper with some of our reversing tools. So there's kind of the expectation with this course that a student comes in with some kind of reversing background. I have made posts and messages inviting people that if they felt they didn't have a reversing background, that I could refer them to resources, and that was more than a month ago. And so I provided some really excellent resources. So I've given opportunity for students to kind of catch up. All that said, we'll still take some time to go through some reversing type things, but this is not the type of course where I'm not going to be teaching WinDbg or IDAPRO necessarily for the first time within this course. But if you're not comfortable with it or you haven't used it, then I'll certainly make other additional videos from some of my past classes available or from other students. So we'll be using some of these tools, and I'll explain and teach you how to use some of these tools for reversing purposes. But this is not a class where I necessarily teach you inside this class how to use IDAPRO or WinDbg for the first time, some of the basics of how you open it up and set breakpoints. And it's really not that complicated. So some of the videos that the students have made and that I can make available to you can definitely assist you to get caught up if that needs to be the case. So really with task 2 is, and it's however you want to do it is up to you, is to find it, to trace that vulnerability. Now some students in this course are very bright and they're experienced as well. So you could have a student that could open it up in IDAPRO and Ghidra and spend some time and they find it, but they may think they find it. So I want you to take it a step further. Even if you're confident that you found it, purely through static analysis, is to confirm it. And how would you confirm it is, you can use it if you're fully comfortable with IDAPRO and Ghidra, great, but use your debugger of choice to confirm your suspicions. So that's what we have going on with Lab 3. Do we have any questions on that? Okay. So last week we dealt with we had an in-class activity, and we'll probably be having more of these types of in-class activities throughout the semester as we're focused more on actual exploit development, and some of the background vulnerability discovery knowledge and whatnot is kind of out of the way. So provided you students with opportunity to work in class, and looks like a lot of people did some really great work. Many of the students finished the exploit. Other students finished the reversing aspect of it. So we were taking a look at Serenity, which is a very dated program. I think this was our starting point here, more or less, and I had done some more progress, but I have so much going on in this, I'm afraid I may have lost it. But, it's not necessarily essential that I have exactly what I had before. How many of you were able to successfully complete the SDH overwrite? Raise your hand if you were successful. Raise your hand if you were not successful. Okay. So 2 people are working on it. I'm not going to give the answer in class, and this is not to penalize the in-class students or the on-campus students. It's more just to, I don't want to give too much away for people. But what did we say was it 1037 or 1034 or? Well, you guys got to have it in your scripts. I guess you guys probably aren't in the IOLab, right? So I'll just go here and I'll just do arbitrary b times do a times 4. I type much better when I'm not on a laptop. Trust me, I type extremely fast, but so I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but we can take a little bit of a look at this here. So get Serenity running and establish our attached to it. And save that, and I'm in the Lab 8 directory. I'm sick of being in the Lab 8 directory. Let's move that. Why did I have a PU in there? I guess it doesn't matter. Mistyped. And nothing happened. Oh, of course, I need to. You can tell it's been a little while since I looked at this. So nothing happened wrong. It went and it generated the file. Which I named Evil M3U. So we have a bunch of 4 1s there, so that's really inadequate. Another thing you could do, maybe kind of help you figure it out, is, and I haven't really shown this before, is I could do, so the location of that is over here, I believe. So I did a DA there, and I could also go over there and some. Why is it all A's? Where are all my other things? Did I do the wrong one?
You have a second assignment. You have to override
What?
You have a second assignment Python, don't you? It's overriding your payload with just the buffer.
I'm expecting to see the A and the B.
That's what I'm saying.
Louder, please.
We're just doing an assignment, we're not doing, we're not a pen game.
Your second assignment's overriding your previous payload that you set us.
I'm not understanding what you're just saying.
Number,
So line number 9.
yeah, the comment outline.
Oh, okay. So this maybe helps you figure it out a little bit, because now we can view the asking and we can see visually that we're almost there, not quite. So we need to make some adjustments there. So I see 8 A's, so it's going to be plus or minus 8, and then we'll have which one will this be? The A's? Is it NSEH or SEH? It's the NSEH, and then we have SEH. How do we find the SEH? Well, we just simply do our load.pykd, pyd, no error, so that lets us know we're successful, and then pymona SEH. If we have bad characters, we would include those, but we don't. It goes and generates that. We could even take one of these right here if we're confident in it. So I could replace that with that. So I don't think it. No, it doesn't let me override it right here. So inside WinDebug, you can change values here, and depending on the debugger you use, you can actually go in there and modify the memory. So if you really wanted to, use a different debugger and modify and change things just so you could test to see if it's working. You can do that in Ollie, and I think you can do that. You can do that in x64 debug too. So I could just overwrite that there, and with this if I wanted to. But you'd have to be aware of little endianness as well. So it may be just easier to avoid confusion and just do it the way that we have been talking about. So that's really all I have to say as far as exploiting it. I mean, I don't want to give too much away because this is a graduate level course, and so I think at this point we've probably given enough clues and insights on how to proceed forward. So that brings us then to the second task. The reversing task is figuring out what was the initial cause of that, and so I also do with the UEIP, remind myself of where I was, and I see this right here. It stopped right here, and I investigate this, and we see the parameters right there, 4141. So I could do dd esi plus c, and this means there's nothing there. So it's trying to dereference this as if it were an address, and because there's nothing there, it's not able to do that, and that's the cause of the crash, because it has the four ones there. Is that an adequate explanation in terms of what the vulnerability is? No, absolutely not. How do we get to this point? So some of you made some excellent progress. I think a couple of different techniques were used. Just broadly speaking, without revealing too much, can we throw around a couple ideas in terms of how we could, trace some of this? What do you think, John? What would be one first step?
Probably looking Ghidra.
Okay. Bailey?
Yeah, that's what I did the other day.
I mean, what would you look at in Ghidra? I mean, that's kind of vague. With
Strings right away.
so strings, looking at strings.
because that can kind of lead you to see what kind of function calls are happening, and then you'd be able to find some things from that.
Do we have any other ideas besides strings that we could, for initial starting point? Yes.
You can just go to that address and I have stuff to go with that. This is
What address?
the 404255.
And so he's referring to an address that is on the stack, which is right here. So we see calls that had happened. Sometimes you can do like a K, and it can show you some stack rewind information. KB will also give you some additional information like some arguments. A lot of this has been overwritten by A's, so we've lost out on some of that information. But one thing that we do see though is this call to Serenity. So somewhere that leads up to this crash. It precedes it. So in terms of tracing the flow of execution, that could be one way that we could approach that. It says warning stack information may not be available. So that lets us know that some of this is not necessarily going to be reliable, partly because of what has gone on here. So if I wanted to open this up in IDA, and this kind of is painful because I actually have my IDA inside a different one for 255. So I could go over here and clicking on the wrong things. So one good step is go to open to the general and do your line prefixes so you can see the line prefixes. Makes it a lot easier. In this case, I'm going to just go to G. And so 404255 was the address that Hans had told us to check out. And looking at this looks to be identical to what we saw inside of WinDbg. And it was this value right here. We went there, dereferenced it. It was all A's, our malicious input. So if I wanted to trace backwards here, the start of this function is right here. Well, what leads up to this function? One thing that I could do is look at my cross references. So I can select this and type X. So I see cross references. I see actually two of them. I guess I've made notes on this. But if there weren't notes, then you wouldn't necessarily know which path leads up to it because they're both going there. What would be one possible way in which we could determine which way leads to this? Because we saw that there were two different paths that we could take to get there. I'm sure some of you have probably done this, but you're just not seeing. So we could combine static analysis with dynamic. So I could set a breakpoint on both of them and just simply see which one gets hit, and that would allow me to determine, hey, it's this one right here. In this case, this is a very ancient binary, so there is no ASLR. So what you see in here, the address is identical to what you have in WinDbg. So I've copied that and so another thing I can do that is really useful, and I think I mentioned this to many of you in class, is you could do to restart this, just go to debug and then R, or you could just be very fast and do Alt-DR. I'll just do yes. And I had that address, and so I did a BP on it. And I could do BL to view my addresses. And so I have a breakpoint there. So if I wanted to see if it hit that one, then I could do so. I really need to close some of these out. And this is so small I can barely read it. Does this say breakpoint hit? Well, this is the breakpoint, so I need to maybe make the font size a little bit bigger. So what this does is it just confirms that, I was able to be successful there in terms of determining which path that it took. And so just kind of tracing backwards from this point could be a next option. So we got to this location here. Or we were right here, and there was a call leading to this. And so then we know that these assembly instructions were executed prior to that. They were inside another function. So what leads up to this? Well, we could backtrack there. And I've already gone through this, and I've indicated which one. So I see two different roads that lead to it. This road and the other one that I called this. And one way in which I was able to do that is just simply quick and dirty, just did a breakpoint on that address, and it allowed me to identify that was the path that was taken. Then we can look up above here and see some of maybe what happened prior, and just not necessarily looking at every single line of code. So I see an fscan, that may be interesting. I see fopen, and this is not something that IDA had indicated right there. This is something I added through comments myself. Just how did I do it? I just simply did a breakpoint there and looked to see what it was opening. How did I know? I looked at the MSDN for fopen, looked at the arguments, and you see the arguments that it's pushing. So it's pretty clear. So just establishing breakpoints at that particular location. If I was interested in what was being called there, I could set a breakpoint right here, and I could view the stack and see what was pushed. So we could do that in WinDbg, or you could just take my word for it, I guess. Then this takes us down to fscan. What do we think about fscan? Bailey?
Should be reading something from a file.
Right, absolutely. Stream is one thing that it reads from it. Is it something, scanf is, or the whole scanf family is something that is a class of functions that are inherently unsafe. And so just saying that there would maybe make me suspicious. So maybe that would be a location to, establish a breakpoint, perhaps. So go back to my WinDbg and just restart it. Okay. Maybe not restart it. And one other thing you could do, and I did this as well as I was interacting with it, is I made a fake M3U where I just created a text file somewhere, I thought, where I just did right here. So this is empty, 0, but it has the appearance of being real, and then I just used Serenity to plop these in there, and then it gives you the option to save as. So you could have a non-malicious M3U file and trace that, just in case you didn't actually have access to a real one. You know, some of you, if you're on your home system, you may actually have real playlists, and you could just easily make use of that. So let's go ahead and load our evil. And we were talking about a breakpoint. And I can, if I want to investigate that, I can do the U, so the unassemble, so I can see what's going on there. This is a good idea too, just to make sure we're not making mistakes. This is a call. It says call EDI, so that's an indirect call. So statically, we may not necessarily know what it's calling, but if we have something like WinDbg, or not WinDbg, IDA Pro, it's able to figure out what that is. Why? Because we have a move EDI to the DS FScan, so it's just able to draw those conclusions. If you're looking at a tool like WinDbg, it may not have drawn those conclusions for you, but a good thing is we can always do a breakpoint and see what EDI is. We can do the DT command on EDI. Actually, we'll need to not EDI directly, but what's inside. So scanf. So if I didn't know how to do that in WinDbg, that's a dynamic way that I could find out that it's making the call there to scanf. And I may have made a mistake here. Did I not set a breakpoint? I did set a breakpoint. Oh, I set the breakpoint after the crash already occurred. So just a stupid little mistake where you're not thinking carefully. So what I would want to do instead is go here, and now I can set the breakpoint before the crash occurs, which that's not what I wanted. So I can do BC and just erase that, and oops, that's what I want there. And so now I can do G for go, and now my breakpoint is ready. So now we've reached that, and now this time it says FScan for us, and that's because it's in the middle of execution, and WinDbg's able to figure that out. When I did the other approach, it wasn't able to figure that out. So we could see some of the parameters that are being pushed there. I don't think this is it. What I'm actually going to do is going to look up fscanf here. So we can see we have a stream, a pointer to a file object that identifies the input, the format, and is it just two? Yeah, I guess it is just two, isn't it? So we have a called as fscanf, and all this is happening before the call, and then we could take a look over and see what happens immediately after the call. So one way in which we could do that is we could do our stepping. So I could single step, and then I could step out, or I could just step over it. So I'll execute everything inside the scanf. So the scanf is going to be the one that's going to be responsible for our overriding. So that's one approach there. Another thing we could do is we could go all the way back to let's do it this way. I'm trying to 404255, I think is what you guys said it was. So this is the parameter that was, or the area that caused this problem. So we could also trace through that. So CES, where does this come from? It comes from ESI, and ESI comes from argument. So this is the argument that was passed to that. So I could go back there and trace that, and this is the argument. So right now I'm trying to follow that EBP plus C, which where we looked at it with the crash was all A's. So that's what we're doing right now. And so SESI is what was pushed. That was the argument that was made. And where does that come from? Well, we can highlight it and we can see that this comes from an argument. So it comes from the first argument. So go back here and trace that again, and so this comes from EBX. Where does EBX come from? EBX comes from right here. This starts to get interesting, because we see fscanf, and then we see this strange looking thing right here. So I could do a breakpoint on that. Which is right there. And then I can hit G to forgo if I want, and it'll stop right there. And so ESP plus 21C, we can check that out. And we can see, yeah, that definitely is of interest to us. So so this is probably a location on the heap, I'm guessing, or not the heap, the stack. Not thinking clearly. So the stack there was overridden with the A's, and so we have at this point what we've done is we saw the FSCANF. We were suspicious of that. We know that it's inherently vulnerable, and immediately after this, we see the EBX, and if we traced further, that EBX leads to the EBP plus C that we saw that was filled with A's on our crash. So we backtraced it to that. The next step here is we suspect it's FSCANF, but we're maybe not sure. So we could maybe set a breakpoint right here, restart it, and see if that's really is responsible. So go ahead and restart this. And no problems this time. Really? I don't know why it does this. So I've created a breakpoint. And it's ready for me to repeat some of what I had just done. So this is our call to FSCANF, and I'm interested in this value right there. I want to see if there are A's in it. There are not A's in it. So I confirm that just by doing that, that's what happens to cause that. There's no doubt whatsoever that that's the cause there. We could trace that even further. We could say the stream. IDA's been nice and it's labeled it as a stream for us. If it hadn't, we could have looked in MSDN and that tells us that's a stream. So backtrace it, doing some testing to see whether or not it was successful, and then EX is moved there. Whenever you have a call to a function, very often, this is a review for the vast majority of you, I realize, is it'll return whatever it's returning into EAX. So this is a handle to the stream that it is returning. So we could even trace that back further. We see that it what's it opening? Well, it's the exploit in 3U. So that was one approach that was suggested by one of our in-class students, is simply to look at the stack, and when we had the exception, and let's go ahead and let it continue, and we saw this on there, and we just traced backwards, and so that proved fruitful for us. May not always prove fruitful, but it's one avenue to approach that, and coupled with the knowledge of vulnerable functions like the scanf family, that allowed us to immediately see something that we could then investigate a little bit further. Bailey discussed another approach where we just could open it up and look at strings. So we could go to view, open subviews, strings. And what strings caught your attention, Bailey, if any?
I was able to find it calling like fopen or something like that.
Was that in the strings or the imports? I don't think it's in the...
It wasn't that. I'm trying to remember.
Well, I know you did the imports. So imports is very, very similar. So you go to that's a very similar technique. Is just go to there, and he just kind of has an idea. You know, he's been around a while. He knows things to look out for. You know, fopen is you're opening the file, and so he was curious if it was there. And you know, if you find it, then you could click on it, and then you could hit your X for cross references, and you can see all the different places that it opens up. These ones here are identical. It reflects the comment that I added there. There are some other places where they're opened. So you would maybe want to investigate some of those and see if they're fruitful or not. You know, that one, you know, is not relevant to us, or maybe it's an alternative way of interacting with the software. Maybe it actually would lead to that. We did a drag and drop to do it, so you know, maybe there's an alternative way of opening it through the menu system that may follow one of those paths. So that was the approach that Bailey did. Is he looked at the imports, he looked at the strings, and fopen was something that really caught his attention. fscanf, that could be another one that might catch your attention, or even sscanf. You know, memory allocation, sometimes those can be useful. A lot of these are, you know, this is not a malware, and so they're being used for typical, normal, benign purposes. So some of these may not, you know, be, you know, of tremendous interest to us. When we look at the strings, though, you know, if none of those imports really caught our attention, we could, you know, maybe we see something like M3U. We know it's interacting with an M3U, but you know, this is massive, huge software, and we don't just want to idly open IDA Pro and start looking at main. We have to have some kind of focal point somewhere to start, at least. You know, and if WinDebug hadn't given us that clue, or we didn't find anything in the imports, then maybe, you know, one of these might be something that we would look at. No cross references, okay. And so I follow this and some menu type stuff going on. This may or may not eventually be of interest. You know, it'd be worth checking out if we hadn't, you know, found it. But I think, you know, we did find a couple clear ways of doing it. You know, the second way being what Bailey had suggested is, you know, we found, you know, fscanf, or in his case, fopen. And we go to fopen, and you know, we can see the different locations. Maybe we happen upon this. Maybe we set breakpoints and confirm that the path of execution goes here, and then everything else there. So, any other additional comments on this malware? Or not malware? Just got done from malware class. Malware on the brain on this software. Any other approaches that you guys made use of, or? I also wanted to revisit another malware that we were looking at called FTP Utility. And we can do much the same thing with that, just looking at this one. I like to do by executable because it's often already running, so it's not at the bottom. So I have a script for that somewhere amidst all this. So we've done the same thing, and we're maybe trying to trace what leads up to this. I could do my EX chain. And then in this case, it's just all A's. Our stack, check that out. Maybe view it as ASCII just to make it more abundantly clear, even though we see the four ones anyway. So we see there's been a fair amount of things that have been overwritten. And the problem here again is it's trying, similar to before, is it's trying to dereference, or to move into, not dereference, but move something into a dereferenced location. So now I see this right here, and if I wanted to investigate that further, I would need that's a module, so I could do LM or LMF, and that can show me the modules that exist, and we see that this is indeed a module or DLL. If you go and investigate it, it's something that belonged to Visual Studio 6.0. So, and this is an older piece of software, so it's just some functional DLLs that help give it some of the functionality that it needs. So that would be one area that I could look at and backtrace some of that. And I think we started to look at that in class before, but it was this should be in our system, Windows, Syswell 64. So if you're not aware, we have a 32-bit application. All the DLLs for that will be in Syswell 64, and 64-bit will be System 32, which may be the opposite of what many people may think of. But Syswell 64 gives you emulation for those 32-bit programs to run on a 64-bit environment. So whatever the logic behind their naming convention, it is what it is. And it's called MFC42. So that would be what I want to look at, and the size here I believe is going to exceed what is allowable by IDA Educational. So I'm going to paste that into my desktop, and this time it worked. We had some problems before with me copying things in this specific file as well, so I actually ended up just simply updating my workstation to the newest version. So I could drop that in here. And this is something you guys won't be able to do with your IDA Educational. You probably could do it with the freeware. So very long, convoluted DLL, and its purpose is with any DLL is to provide exports. And I saw that was, see, sometimes they make it a little bit difficult by trying to help us. So what I'm going to do here is Control C and do this. Oh, it's not even letting me paste it. Okay, that one doesn't cooperate. Okay, so And I expect that unfortunately it would do this. So it gives me this one right here, that address, and mistyped it. So that would be the start of it there at that address, plus X1C. Oh, did the wrong one. So that gives me an address right here, which is what I'm after. And then I can look at the base address for this. Did I not copy it? Oh, there we go. So that would be the offset here if I was lucky. And turn on my line prefixes, and maybe I didn't even need to bother with any of that. Looks like I may not have needed to bother with it, but because these are they the same? They're different. So I could take this and add that to the base of the DLL. And I could just go there. And looks like right here. I didn't really want to spend, I know we spent a lot, like several minutes working on that, unfortunately. But I had mentioned earlier that MakePath was of interest. So I kind of given a hint on that, and I'm sure if you trace through this, you would eventually find a path leading to MakePath. I don't want to spend time working on that just because it'll take too long to do that. So I'm going to restart this and do a breakpoint on MakePath, because if we remember, that was what I had told us. So it did the breakpoint there, and I can try to make the font bigger. And it changes that to black, so I need to Sometimes it's, there we go. So I've established my breakpoint and I hit G for go, and I notice that I get all these breakpoints even though I haven't even executed my script yet. So some of these just are not going to be of interest. One thing that you could do, and this is more of what I wanted to show us here with this example, is we can take a look at make path MSDN. And we can see some of the different parameters that are of interest to us. And what we'd notice is, and it's going to be this one that we're interested in. I have a breakpoint that hits right here, but then I have move ESP EBP. What does that mean?
It's saving the stack pointer.
It's saving the stack pointer, but we're also right here, we're interacting with that. So, we're inside make path and it's been saved, but we're also accessing that value. So these were values that were on the stack that were parameters that were pushed, the arguments that were pushed. So, if I was looking for, say I'm looking for all the A's to try and find, because we have the buffer overflow with a bunch of A's. One thing that I could do is, if we do a single step, that's going to be a T. We do another single step, that's a T. Well, what if we could automate this? And actually you can do that. So I'm going to go to the next one. So hit G again. I just do T, and I see 3 T's that I would need. And then if I'm interested in why do I do the T's? Well, because right now EBP is not of interest to us. We need to have the move EBP ESP for that to happen first. I don't want to have to keep typing a bunch of stuff. So I'm maybe interested in what's the value in EBP plus 14. So I can take that and dereference that and make this a little bit bigger here. Come on. So I get the value right there. I can maybe want to confirm, is that EBP? Yeah, it checks out EBP plus 14. And so I just saved myself, a bunch of typing. Well, what if I really wanted to put like go there? And additionally, there's another step as well here. So these are locations that will contain the A's, and so I could check that out, and this is going to be the heap. So there's some location on the heap that the bad food is maybe an indication if we didn't know. Another thing that I could do is I could do so I just did another command right there, the ddpoi EBP plus 14, and see what it did. It gave me the exact same address. And so if my goal here is to go through a bunch of all these make paths and to find the address on the heap and then go to that address and see if there's a bunch of A's there, then I could take that command and I could add that to what I'm building. So I was building this right here. Well, actually, I would need to go first. And then now I can add that there. And I could even add another go to it just to streamline it even further if I wanted to. So there's nothing here. Nothing there, nothing there, nothing there. Well, I'm not really surprised because we have all these make paths and I haven't even loaded the, is it 12:15? Sometimes my VM time is wrong. What? Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I see that's a breakpoint, but I don't really. I could maybe disable that because I can keep getting this breakpoint. I haven't even launched the program yet, so I could just do. I did BD and I did the number, so that was the number for it right there, and so now it's disabled. So hit go, and now it's running. So now I can do insert a breakpoint. So go to the debug and break, and I can go and maybe I don't have good memory and I don't remember what it was, and so I can just do BL, see my breakpoints, and I can do BE to enable it. Double check that and see the E. So it went from D to E, so now it's enabled. So now I'm ready with my make path, and so now what we can do, we can run our script and see what happens. So we have this command that or debugging thing that I created. That's not useful. So let go, and is this useful? Oh, I missed it. And I'm just looking for A's. It's taking longer than I remembered. There we go. Finally, we did find it. So some of the stacked information there is missing. Maybe we figure out this is where it occurs. We could then find another way to, see what leads up to this particular location. But if we had, at this point, we just wanted to maybe confirm that, make path is responsible, or at least partly responsible for what's going on. And I think that offers, maybe some indication that that is partly responsible. So if I hit G again, then we get this other breakpoint that we had established long ago, which was the actually no, it's not. We did establish it as a breakpoint, but right now we get it in the form of an access violation. So at this point we could do our EX chain. So make path, did it create the A's being there? No, but because the A's were there, it did result in this being compromised there was something that led to allowing those A's to occupy so much space and to overwrite some of that. And maybe we didn't identify all of what led up to that, but we did see that make path did lead to that, and so from that point, we would just want to trace our functionality and see where exactly in the code the path of execution leads to make path, and maybe trace the input back a little bit further. So that's really all the more that we're going to say about this particular binary. So right now we have our SCH override assignment out, and I think it should be pretty straightforward, and I guess I'll see you guys on Thursday, so chat with you then.